So my name is Timothea Pham. My middle name is Tan Thum Kim, and my parents are from Vietnam.
My name is Saltanat Berdikeva. I'm originally from Kyrgyzstan. It's a small country in Central Asia.
I'm Regina, and I'm originally from Mexico. I grew up in Querétaro, Mexico, and so I'm a Mexicana. I was born in El Paso in Texas, and then my parents moved to Mexico to start a business. So yeah, both my parents are from the northern state of Chihuahua, and I grew up in Querétaro.
My name is Raquel Fornazaro. I'm originally from São Paulo, Brazil. My family, part of my family is from Italy, a few generations back. The other side is mainly just native Brazilians, some African descendancy, maybe Portuguese and Spanish, so a big mix in there.
My name is Oscar Corripio Luna, or Oscar Enrique Corripio Luna, and I'm originally from Morelia, Michoacán, which is in Mexico.
My name is Julio Mota, and I was born in the United States. My mom's side of the family is from Puerto Rico, and my father's side of the family is from the Dominican Republic.
My name is Claudia Beatriz Fix. I am Claudia Beatriz. I never use Beatriz, but it's there. And I was born in Brazil.
My name is Jackie Valatka, and I am from Nairobi, Kenya. That's where I was born. My mother and father are Goan. Goa is off the south coast of India, south of Mumbai on the Indian Ocean. And my mom was born in Tanzania in East Africa.
My name is Julia Csekö, and I am Brazilian American, actually Brazilian American. So my parents are Brazilian, and I was born in the USA, actually, but my whole family is still in Brazil.
I do. I was born in California, so yes, I'm like by definition, a U.S. citizen. Yeah, yeah, Vietnamese American. I would, that's how I always identify as.
I do consider myself American more and more lately. I came to the United States when I was quite young. I was an exchange student when I was 17 years old. And I think through the years, the country has grown into me a lot more. And I think in kind of more recent years, as I grow older, I think of myself more American than I ever felt before. It's more of a feeling than anything else, and kind of a more of a greater sense of patriotism, I guess, by way of like really caring for the country and what happens, and really willing to be part of the positive change in here, and just like rooting for the country. That's probably something that didn't really feel like when I was younger. So I think it's just that sense of how it makes me feel and how much I want to give back.
Yes and no. I certainly feel proud to be a U.S. citizen, but I think the term American to me means something different than it means to a lot of people. There's Central America, and there's North America, and there's South America, right? And I think even that piece was taught differently to me in Mexico than it was in the United States. I had a teacher in middle school in Mexico who would go on rants and say, America is not a country, it's a continent, right? And that really stuck with me throughout my childhood, and I still think about that moment constantly, where I think to a lot of people in the world, America is not necessarily a country. So I think about it through that lens.
That's an interesting question. I think some days I consider myself more American than others. When I'm in Brazil, I consider myself fully Brazilian. I think it just comes naturally whenever I step there. When I'm not there, I feel that I'm half and half. I don't know, fully American, but definitely partially.
I think now I do. It took a while, but I think now I do, yeah. I mean, I would say around half of my life, maybe a little bit more, living in the US. So at the beginning I felt very foreign and I was having a hard time assimilating. But over time I started like being like Bostonia, for example, you know, like I started like having some sort of identity with the city that when other Americans came, I was like, oh, you guys cannot like talk about Boston like this or things like that. And little by little, I think, same way as I did for the city, I started feeling like that about the country. And over time, I assimilated it and felt part of it.
A good question. I do. I consider myself American. I consider myself Dominican, and I also consider myself Puerto Rican a little bit.
I am at South America and North America. I have the best of both worlds. It depends what is the criteria to answer that question. What does it mean to consider yourself American? Again, is it Pan-American, North America, South America? I'm here right now in the United States. I have dual citizenship. So right now, at this moment, at this time, yes, I consider myself American.
I do. I have gotten my U.S. citizenship. It took a very long time. It took me 21 years to become a citizen. And so it was a hard-fought decision and battle to become a citizen. I have lived in the United States since 1988, so a long time. And of now more than half my life, right? So most of my life has been in the United States now.
Technically, yes, because I was born here. It was a very strange process because I was born here, and then I moved back, or I was taken back when I was 2 months old, and then I lived here when I was 9 years old, and then I lived here like from my 30s to now, which is my 40s. So I think right now I consider myself both.
So they were refugees during the Vietnam War. So they came the year of 1975. So it's interesting because it's like, I don't know if they had a choice necessarily, but that was like the choice that was presented to them in a time of crisis. So yeah, my dad was able to come to San Diego, and my mom relocated to the Pennsylvania area during that time.
I came to the U.S. as an exchange student, and I did not necessarily have the goal of staying here per se, but you know, education. I actually came a few times and left, and then came back again for graduate school and stayed on and got job opportunities, kind of an exciting life of living in a, you know, a pretty diverse and interesting place like Washington, D.C., and got interesting opportunities where I met interesting people, so just kind of stayed on, and it just, you know, school, then a job, and then I managed to get myself a green card through the self-sponsorship, and that worked out. So it's it wasn't like a goal that was I am going to stay in America. It just was like, I'm going to get my education. Oh, and then this exciting job is coming through, and then another job comes through, and then you know, the next goal leads to the next goal, and before I knew it, I kind of feel like I decided to stay here afterwards.
I moved here alone in the year 2005. The plan wasn't really to stay here for a long time. It was just to come, stay for maybe a year and a half, learn some English, and either go to Italy and settle there for a little while longer, or go back to Brazil. So not really planning to come and stay.
Well, I never really intended to stay here. I moved here. My dad always wanted it for me because he thought the country had better opportunities for me. And the way he pitched it for me was the education. He told me that if I had an American degree, I could use it anywhere in the world. So he never sold it to me as a, hey, you move to the US forever. So for me, it was because the school where I wanted to study in Mexico was too expensive in comparison to the education here.
So we moved out of and back to the United States multiple times and for different reasons. The first time we moved back to the United States, I was just a child in kindergarten, and I believe it was for schools, I believe, just to get an education in the United States. Then we left, and the family's situation changed drastically in between returning to the United States when I was in kindergarten and returning to the United States when I was like sophomore in high school. At that point, my dad was not in the picture, and my mom and I and my brother had to make a decision to return to the United States, you know, based on his situation and what we wanted our futures to be.
I came here 25 years ago for a job. It was a 1-year job, and 25 years later, I'm still here. I came with my son only because I thought it was a nice experience for him to experience summer, 1 year, kind of like an exchange program or an immersive experience. He was only 6 at the time. But then the way things progressed, I ended up staying.
So in August of 1982, there was a coup in Kenya. And the coup was very traumatic, especially to people who are not Black in Kenya. It targeted people who were not Black, or at least the mob did. There was a group who tried to overthrow the then president at the time, Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi. And they waited when the army was at a training or war games, as they called it, off-site, outside of Nairobi, and took over the media and took over the public services. And so, of course, once the powers that be, the army, found out, they were going to do something about it. But the mob, the just general collective people, really got out of hand. And when there is a mob mentality, it is not reasonable. They don't think about people as human. And so my family decided they were going to leave for a better life.
Both my parents moved here because of a military dictatorship. And my father was being sought after, and so she married him. And she was going to do her PhD in Columbia in New York. And so she married him to take him out of the country, essentially. She was like, you know what, you want to come with me? And he was like, yeah, sure. So they went to New York, and they stayed there for a while. And then they moved around a little because of my mom's degree. And then when we were born, I was born, I have a sister that's 2 years older than me. But when I was born in 1980, when the amnesty came out, and so they went back.
Huh, that's so interesting. I love the food. I'm a huge foodie, so it's like one of my favorite foods. It's also a way for me to like learn more about like the history and also like the politics of the country. It's very reflected in the food. Another thing I really love is they do have a really deep appreciation for arts and culture. So if you do go, yeah, there's like a lot of traditional art, but a lot of young people trying to create new forms of art, which is really nice, and it's interesting, but I feel like art and culture is really embraced there, and that carries over. Growing up, you know, my parents are artists as well. They play instruments like piano, the zither, so that's something I really do appreciate. I don't know if it's specific to Vietnamese culture, but it's really nice. And Vietnamese women, again, this is like very specific, but most Vietnamese women I meet are very like strong people, and that's very embraced in Vietnamese culture. Having the woman kind of in charge of like finances and managing a lot of family affairs, which I feel like is pretty unique, and I feel like people don't understand that about Vietnamese culture, so that's really nice.
What's my favorite thing about my culture in Kyrgyzstan is there are many things, but I guess one thing that pops out is, if I can describe it in 2 words, is vibrancy and friendliness. It's a very open country that welcomes everyone, extremely hospitable, and I really love that. And I really like the vibrancy. It's very diverse, very colorful, very rich, very old, and I really appreciate that because I think it's one of a kind.
Where to start? There's so many things to talk about. The holidays, Dia de Muertos, Dia de la Independencia. You know, the food, Mexican food is considered a world cultural heritage and is protected by the UNESCO. I'm biased, but there's nothing better than Mexican food, let's be real. Mexican people are some of the kindest, funniest, and best people all around that you'll ever meet.
The weather is a good one, although Boston weather now is feeling much better. So whenever you ask me in the winter, it's just fully, the only answer is weather. But I do love the easiness of the culture. Everything just seems very happy and people are very welcoming. So I really appreciate that about Brazil.
If I was going to think about my favorite thing, I would say food. You know, like Mexican food is something that I really, really like. There's other traits. I like how warm we are, you know, like that feeling of like brotherhood. It's a little bit warmer of a culture. I remember when I was in Mexico and Americans came to visit, I always thought it was very funny how they will only shake hands and we were more of like, hey, come over here, what are you doing? So that's something I do love.
So for Dominican culture, I will say the food is obviously up there. I still now in the US make mangu all the time. It's like mashed plantains. It was also the culture itself was very close-knit. Families tended to stay in touch much more closely and see each other much more often, which as a teenager was pretty annoying at times, you know, to have to meet with, you know, spend time with your grandma, right, instead of spending time with your friends or doing whatever else I wanted to do. But now as an adult, you know, I can see the benefits of having a family that's really close-knit and that you can rely on.
My family is there. Everyone that I love and cared for, that are very close to me. They are my safety net. They represent my emotions. My DNA is completely invested there.
Kenya is the most beautiful place. When you wake up in the morning, there's dew in the grass and it is fresh. You can smell the earth. The food is always just plentiful and nutritious and fresh. There's no preservatives. If we ever wanted to eat anything, we just went and picked it off the tree. We didn't worry about the shape or if it was beautiful and store shelf ready. It was just sweet and delicious and flavorful, and that might be my most favorite thing. But I love the different temperate zones in Kenya. We have so much, from the Rift Valley to the slopes of Mount Kenya to the treetops of the Aberdares to the savanna grassland where you can just see for miles with no buildings, the coast where you can swim on the coral reef, the wildlife. It's an incredible place to live. The weather is spectacular. It is not humid because we are high. You're on the equator, but you get the beautiful sunshine without the humidity and the stickiness that comes with it. It's just a lovely place to live.
The warmth of people, I think. I also like the weather, but it does get a little too warm sometimes. It is hot. Easygoing energy that people have. It's very easy to talk to people. People are very welcoming. People want to connect and make friends. And it is something that I felt when I got here, that it was harder to make friends in some ways, because talking to someone one day didn't mean that they necessarily wanted to keep that conversation going and whatnot. And in Brazil, if you talk to someone and you hit it off, you're like, oh, we're friends. And it's like just the colors and how vibrant and beautiful it is, the landscapes. I mean, it's just these big rocks in the middle of the city and the ocean. It's all these very dramatic landscapes. I do think that Rio is like the most beautiful city I've ever seen, and I've traveled quite a bit, and I do think it still wins, even though it's a mess, but it's so beautiful. Yes.
Yeah. Again, not too sure if it's just specific to Vietnamese culture, but it's very specific to my experience. Kind of a lot of like unrealistic expectations for younger people. There's a lot of layers to that, but I feel like there's a lot of pressure on young people to be successful, and by successful, it's seen as like monetarily successful, so a lot of like education focus, a lot of career focus, and there is like I wouldn't necessarily call it a burden, but there's a lot of expectation for young people to take care of the elderly, which is, I think, pretty universal, and I feel like that is very important. But sometimes what I've seen is that that is like the most important thing in the culture. So I feel like, I don't know, there's not enough room for young people to like really discover their individuality. It's really, you're living for your parents or your grandparents, which I think is like challenging. I wouldn't say it's super negative, but I feel like it's pretty different than when I speak to other people who are like born in the States or have been here for generations. Yeah.
The least favorite thing about my culture or home country is inevitably it ends up being a political conversation, right? Because I think that's the thing that defines many things that are not likable in many circumstances. There are two things that stand out for me. One is pollution, and I see it more and more. This dependence on cars. I think it's, as a developing country, there's that sense of people wanting to have more of what the developed countries had, which is not necessarily a good thing. But I think I really wish that we jumped from this drive to consumerism, driving and owning cars, pollution, and this just kind of senselessness of all of that, and just jump straight into like realizing how unnecessary it is. And instead of solving a problem of pollution, we could just realize we can avoid it. And so that kind of makes me a little bit upset about how it actually got worse over the years. And the other big thing that I dislike about my home country is cronyism. It's something that I always disliked. It's something that my father disliked and got into trouble with writing about it. And I think that's the trouble of many countries like that in the region. Not just, it's not isolated to my country, but I think cronyism, corruption that kind of holds back the country is something I really wish could be addressed systematically to allow the countries to thrive, because they have so many great resources, and really achieve its potential. I think it would be an absolutely amazing opportunity if they were more like Scandinavia, where my husband is from, where you have less of cronyism and less of corruption, then you're going to have it doesn't matter how much resources you have or the size of the country, you can really do well.
the femicide and the feminicides that have gone on in the country, and the complete lack of accountability for politicians, and the unwillingness to really tackle it like the problem as it serves to be addressed, and just how the upper classes in Mexico talk about the issue. Like they just want to sweep it under the rug and not talk about it, pretend like it's not an issue. When thousands of low-income women have been murdered and disappeared, and very little has been done to put an end to it.
I don't like that Brazil is so uncertain politically, and I don't like the lack of safety. The education could also be a bit better. So the lack of opportunity, safety, and the political uncertainty, those are, I think, the three major points of concern.
Probably the least favorite thing is, I think, the sense of, I think they're always trying to get an edge, like finding a way to take an advantage, and I think that's what has led to so much corruption and like not following the rules, and ultimately like lack of security.
A couple things come to mind. I feel like the safe option is to say the intense, I guess, level of faith that there was. Lots of people are very, very religious, which is fine, you know, to each their own. But I've never been very religious. So having to live in a society that is still really religious, and you know, forms like laws and, you know, like societal norms are still shaped by religion. It's not something I really like. I prefer the US in that way, which actually does have that problem, but I'll say slightly less so than in the Dominican Republic.
There is a big social gap, which makes it very unsafe. Things we take it for granted when we're here. I don't want to say that we're spoiled here in the United States, but a lot of people do not have the knowledge or the understanding of what it is not to be able to do trick or treat, because you cannot possibly knock or ring the bell in someone's homes because nobody's going to open the door. And before you go into a building in Sao Paulo or Rio, for example, big cities, you have to go through many gates. And you have to be identified and announced. So trick or treat doesn't exist. You can also never leave your bike, your bicycles outside. You can barely be outside. So though, unfortunately, those are the things that I hate the most. I also hate when I have to travel back to Brazil and I have to delete all my apps on my iPhone, or even have a phone that doesn't have anything, just an Uber app for emergencies, because I cannot hold my cell phone outside. Those are the things that I hate the most about this beautiful country.
So I have a couple of things that really break my heart when it comes to Kenya. One is when there is political instability. It is one of the more stable places in Africa, but that does not mean it is stable. Everything is relative. When I hear of students being shot to go vote, or voter suppression, or all of the corruption and bribing that has to take place, it makes me sad, because it takes away from all of the incredible things that we should be focusing on there. So that really makes me sad. That part of it really overshadows and makes people insecure, makes people unable to be themselves and to enjoy everything that's around them. Because if you're always afraid, you cannot enjoy your life. And when people don't accept who they are and the beauty of the natural culture that they were born in. So both Goa and Kenya were colonies. Kenya was a colony of the British, Goa was a colony of the Portuguese, and they both did not very nice things in our countries. The Portuguese raised all the temples and put up churches, and that's why Goa is so Catholic. In Kenya, the British brought the Indians over to work on the railroad because the African people would not work on the railroad because there were man-eating lions there. And so the Indians were brought over against their will and didn't really intend on doing this manual labor and come there. And then when they finally found a foothold and established themselves, when they were targeted, it feels almost like a double hit, like from both sides, because you're brought here to do something that would help the country, but both sides, the colonial and the people who are native, both hate you because you're not one of them, and they see you as, even though you're not necessarily with the British, they see you as an outsider. So it makes me sad when I hear a go and say they are Portuguese, because I want to say that you're more than that. You're more than that. You are from the land that you came from, and yes, that culture is there, but don't lose part of who you are, because they're both important.
They are similar to many other places that have been colonized. Brazil is an extractivist colony. So basically what happened to Brazil is that it was created for extractivism, for things to be extracted and taken away. So there wasn't really a lot of urban planning, and there wasn't a lot of thinking about what people needed. So schools, hygiene, and plumbing, and sanitation, and things like that were not prioritized in any way. And so that left us with a really bad structure. It left the country and the cities with bad bones, I would say. And it creates a lot of problems, such as lack of urban planning. So we have a lot of slums, we have a lot of inequality. And because of many, many years of slavery, there's a horrendous inequality, racial and social inequality that go hand in hand. And that's really sad, because there's so much potential and so many people that will never really get tapped. These people never get a chance to, have an education and have time to figure out what they want to do and who they are. It's just a really big grind and soul crushing. I think corruption in that sense, but when I say corruption, I like to say that it's connected to this lack of structure, because I don't think that it comes in a vacuum. I think it really comes from a history of a domino effect of bad planning.
I think my parents were lucky to have learned a little bit of English back in Vietnam, but a huge culture shock, obviously, coming to different parts of the country, like Southern California and Pennsylvania, where this was a huge wave of Vietnamese immigrants, and obviously I think people didn't take too kindly to that, so they experienced a lot of racism, a lot of violent threats as well. If you've been to Orange County or that area, you would kind of understand that a little bit, but I think that was a really big challenge, and also they came with nothing. So everything that they had to be left behind. They had to start from scratch. So that I think was a huge challenge. And my parents had to take care of their siblings as well. Yep, but Vietnamese identity was really important to them. So Vietnamese was actually my first language, even though I grew up and was born in California. So they wanted to really ingrain that it was important to really learn the language and really to understand. But that kind of backfired when I started school at a really young age. I wasn't responding to English. So I was like, I think my parents, but I think their intentions were really good, and I'm kind of glad that they did that, because I can understand and I can still speak a little bit, so it's nice.
I guess the biggest change, if I could define in one word, is independence. I left my home, my nest, And coming here alone, by definition, I just became thrust into independence, and I think it was a good thing. I think looking back, there was a lot of struggle, but it was also a very good thing.
So I moved to the US in high school. So for the first time, I think I experienced being an other in a country, right? So there were a lot of jokes, like inappropriate jokes, verbal harassment, stereotypes, negative comments that I experienced about my identity, which I had never experienced before. You know, for example, I would get asked a lot about my citizenship status, which is so inappropriate, and so that I kind of became used to that being a part of informal conversations. I went by Regina instead of Regina for all of high school because I wanted to fit in, and that now looking back, that seems like the first sort of attempt at erasure of my identity. And so I had to kind of reclaim my name in college and had to go through a very conscious choice to do that. And it was a long process. And people still sometimes call me Regina, and I have to correct them, like, oh, I go by Regina, it's the Spanish pronunciation. A lot of, I met my husband here in the United States. He's from Nebraska, ironically. I never thought I would marry someone from Nebraska, but here we are. Yeah, I mean, all of my education around social justice, feminism, and DEI concepts happened in the US, and that would not have happened in the same way in Mexico, because there's still a lot of stigma. Even feminism, it's this sort of thing that you don't talk about, it's negative, it's to some degree shameful. Like, it's not necessarily a good thing, like I think it is here to identify as a feminist, right? So I'm certainly glad for that.
Well, it was hard because I think when I was in Mexico, I was this very outgoing and charismatic person that I didn't mind being in the center of attention, and you know, like, it was completely fine, and it was something that was something I was very comfortable with. And even when I moved to the US, I always felt like my English level was very good, but I remember suddenly I went from being this very outspoken kid in the classroom to like one of the most quiet ones that will stutter if he had to talk, and like just became this like very you know, introverted person, which wasn't really me. And so that was a very uncomfortable situation to like see this side of myself.
The big change, for one, was that now in the United States, I was being exposed to a lot of different type of people. You know, my old school, the DR, was a small private school. There were probably 20 people in my class, maybe like 25 people. And in my new high school in Lynn, Massachusetts, there were, you know, hundreds of, I think, children or teenagers in my class, and probably thousands in the school overall. So I learned a lot. I met a lot of different type of people, not even just culturally, but lots of different personalities, and was exposed to, we were all exposed to American culture. Like in the DR, everyone listened to rap and house music and different types of like pop music. But I'd really fallen behind in the DR. I needed to catch up a lot. So I was like listening to way more music, meeting people from all over the world. One of my close friends who's coming back to the US next week actually for a visit is from Armenia. So sort of new friendships with new people, a lot of new different experiences in terms of just entertainment and music. More food too. The food is good in the DR. I like it. But like there wasn't much in the way of, you know, Indian food or Chinese food or Brazilian food, right? So I'm giving a vague answer, I know, but I want to say new everything. There's new experiences, and yeah, I'll leave it there.
Everything. Everything was a very interesting new experience. I remember when I first came to this place in Longmeadow, Massachusetts. The organization that I was working for, they prepared this beautiful basket, like a welcome basket, with peanut butter, jelly, jam, and marshmallow, and bread. And I didn't understand the combination. I didn't know what to do. It was me and my son looking at each other. It's like, what is this about? What do we do? So yes, in Brazil, we do not eat peanut butter with bread. I mean, peanut butter, it's not even a thing. We have paçoca, which is also from peanuts, but so there were little things that I can say. The bigger things, I think we are all capable to adapt.
So coming to the U.S. Was intense for me. I really had a dream of going to college, and my family didn't have a lot of money. And so for me, when I came to this country, my father gave up his entire pension fund for me to come and have a chance here to go to college. And he said to me at the airport, he said to me, "Not make me proud, do well, have fun, learn a lot." He said to me, "If you lose this, you're losing the chance for the family." So when I came here, in my teenage brain, I couldn't let him say, "I told you so," for one thing. But also, the weight of having the chance for the family on your back is a lot. And so knowing that I had to pay that back, knowing that I had to work hard, keep my grades up, through my college years, I had a lot of food insecurity. I struggled with where I was going to live part of the time. I had amazing friends who I am so fortunate to have met, but I, especially at the beginning, didn't know who I could trust and who I could depend on, and they've proved themselves to me. But you know, you don't know how much you can ask for because you don't know what people expect in return. And I remember the summer of my freshman year, I got hit by a motorcycle between the Commons and the Garden, and I had to be on crutches, and I had a concussion. And when they were trying to release me from the hospital, they said, "You have to have somebody to be released to. You can't just go home. You have to have somebody who will say they vouch that they will watch you." My family was all in Kenya. I was like, okay, who am I going to call? So I called the people that I was working for on co-op, and I said, "Look, please, can you just get me out? You don't have to do anything, but if you could sign the paper and let me walk out the door, I'd be very grateful." And so they came and they got me out and they took me to my apartment, and they said to me, "So where is your stuff?" I said, "Well, this is my stuff. I had 2 suitcases, and that was my stuff. And that's what I slept on. That's what I had. I had no bed, no dresser, no." And they were like looking at me completely horrified. And I said, "Well, it's fine. I'm making do. It's totally fine." And so they said, "Well, no, we can't leave you to stay here." And I remember my boss was a lawyer, he was a partner at the law firm, and he said to me, "You got to come to my house." And I said, "Oh, okay." And then every episode I had ever watched of Criminal Minds and Law and Order and whatever horror shows you have seen came into my head, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be heard from again. What if I go to the suburbs and I can't get out and I'm going to be locked in the basement? And of course that wasn't true. He was an amazing human and took great care of me, and even offered me a room in their home and said, "You can live with us while you're in school."
So I think the most striking thing for me is how safe I felt here. Like Brazil, and Rio in particular, is extremely dangerous for all the reasons that we were just, covering in terms of like structure and poorly planned cities and inequality. And it is very dangerous. And you have to be really careful about not wearing jewelry and where you're going, not being out at night in certain places, like the downtown area. At night, you should really be careful. If you don't know where you're going, please don't go there. And even other places in the city, it's just about like being on the right side of the street and knowing where there's danger. And sometimes there's turf wars between like drug lords, and there are shootouts. And I grew up hearing so many gunshots that I know how to identify guns by their sound, which is so bizarre. And it's like, it's such a fearful way to be. So this was something that I felt really relaxed here in a way that I'm never able to feel when I'm in Rio. Like leaving my bag on the back of a chair when I'm in a restaurant, you can't do that. It's like you have to always know where your bag is, be zipped, and like, not have your phone in your back pocket. It's just, you can't walk around looking at a map on your phone. So these things are really, really uncomfortable. And I think that this comfort of safety is something that I really felt was very different and was a very big life change.
Yeah, so a lot of my mom's family, actually on both my mom's and my dad's family are still there, but I have some amazing cousins, and I have a really good aunt and uncle who live there. My aunt is actually a big arts administrator as well, so she works to serve Ho Chi Minh City and to help support artists there. And I have a cousin who's a tattoo artist, which is kind of like still frowned upon in Vietnam. And I have two cousins that are traditional painters, but they're also teachers as well. And they're incredible. They have their work shown in galleries, in that area and like other places. But yeah, so I miss hanging out with them. And even though there's like kind of a language barrier, just because I've been here in the States for so long and like out of practice for a little bit, but when I do see them, it's like, yeah, we grew up kind of together. I went to Vietnam like a good amount growing up.
I definitely miss my family in my home country because I have my own family, my children, my husband here, but my family that I was born into and raised are all in Kyrgyzstan. And my parents are elderly. With my parents getting older and the inability to just jump on a plane and be there in 2 hours, it's impossible. So yeah, family for sure.
There's a lot of people I miss, friends, family members. A lot of them have moved away as well, interestingly enough. But yeah, there's a lot of good people that I had to leave behind.
I miss my family, that's for sure. After so many years living here, the amount of friends have dwindled. The amount of family has also, unfortunately, been reduced. I do miss the Sunday lunches with everybody, with the families, the friends, barbecues. We used to have that a lot. Those were fun. So I miss the camaraderie.
Yeah, I miss a lot of my childhood friends. I miss my family. I came here by myself, so in a way you get used to being that kind of nomad that is like, all your friends that you meet are usually like foreigners that are only there for a couple of years and then they move around. And so yeah, I miss like those people that have been there for a long time and still are my friends,
Yes, yeah, I'll say my father. So I didn't elaborate earlier on, but my father is both of my parents, well, my father is an immigrant, and he came over as an undocumented immigrant. My mom has the immigrant experience in the sense that she left her country at 18, but Puerto Rico is technically a colony. Not technically, it is a colony of the United States. So it wasn't technically international travel. So yeah, when we first moved back to the US when I was young, to elementary school, my father was a part of that. He was a part of our lives. And when we returned to Santo Domingo in middle school, he did not come with us. And he wouldn't get back to Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic until he was caught by American authorities and deported well after we had already turned back to the United States. I want to say in 2012 or so. So my father, there's a lot of family. In fact, most of our family is in the Dominican Republic, but I'll say him.
And very accomplished. They had jobs. My nephew got into medical school. My niece was going to work for JP Morgan, and then the pandemic came, and they went back to Brazil because they really were the first ones to leave New York and go back to Brazil during that March. And Trump closed the borders to Brazilians, so they never came back. So they moved on with their lives. So at a certain point in my life, everything was great. My family was coming here much more often. New York was the meeting point. But then after the pandemic, everything changed, and even my son went back to Brazil, and I'm the only one here now. So literally everyone who is there are the people that I miss the most. So yay for WhatsApp and FaceTime.
I miss my friends that I grew up with, my family friends who we spent so much time with. Just over in the States, it's just different. We don't visit people like we do there. I mean, we have people that we will go and enjoy a potluck here or there, but there it was part of the culture. You would go on a Sunday after church, sit, hang out. There was no expectation of a big fancy meal or anything, but you would just spend that time together. And so I remember just jumping on the bed with my cousins and jumping on the beds with my friends and just being, like sitting in the yard and talking and looking up at the clouds and laying on the grass. Just very simple things that maybe we take for granted or maybe we don't care about, but I miss that.
Yeah, I miss everybody because everybody's there. Like my family is all in Brazil, so definitely my mom, my dad, my sister, you know, extended family too. Why not? Some of us, we don't agree politically, which makes it hard to miss them, but still miss them. Yeah. But yeah, mostly my immediate family and friends too. You know, again, I guess that one's very similar to other people that I've talked to. It's just like your friends that you grew up with. It's kind of like, it feels like a different life. Like, you know, like you have two different lives. One of them that you established where you grew up, and then the other one that you established a little older, later in life, with like making new friends and creating all these new connections.
Yeah, yes. So in Orange County, growing up, super diverse area, but the school I went to, it was a private school, and while it was very diverse, like my elementary and middle school, there was still like a majority of white people, and I spent some time in like Irvine, Newport Beach area. That's a majority white population. So, and the Asian people that I was connected with, they were more Chinese or Korean. They weren't really Vietnamese. They lived, the Vietnamese community is in another city called Garden Grove. So my only like touch point with Vietnamese people and Vietnamese culture was really through my family or when I went to go visit those areas. Yeah, but then high school, it totally flipped. It was a majority international population. And like, I think white American born people were a minority. So yeah, I don't know. So I always felt like, I don't know. My friends are most of my close friends are Middle Eastern. So I like studied Arabic in college and like Farsi a little bit, you know? So it's like, again, a little bit disconnected from Vietnamese culture, but yeah, so I always felt kind of like out of place in that sense.
Have I ever felt out of place in the USA? It's an interesting question. I think it depends on a situation. I think I never felt, I don't know, overt racism or anything like that, but I think I can't relate to American football even after all these years. So if I'm in a room with fans of American football and they're all rooting for whatever team they're rooting for and really getting the game, I don't feel it's my place. And I'm generally not a big fan of organized sports. So let alone I understand the rules of soccer, but American football seems kind of a different animal. So yeah, maybe American football. If I'm going to an American football game with a bunch of friends and they're all into it and I'm not, I will definitely feel out of place. But I can't think of any other situation.
There have been some negative things. Like I can recall a time when in high school when we came back from spring break and there was a group of students laughing, and I asked them what they were laughing about, and apparently they had spent their spring break in the U.S.-Mexico border because I guess some family of theirs owned property over there, and they had spent their time making scarecrows and shooting guns across the border, just like into the I guess just land there to keep the effing Mexicans out. Yeah, when people stereotype my identity, right, and there's a lot of stereotypes about Mexicans and Mexican culture. I can remember one time in college, I was having a conversation with some guy, and he asked me, and he told me, "Good luck with the immigration process." And I was like, "I'm a citizen." And he said, "Oh, really? Oh my God, congratulations." And I'm like, wow, that would have never happened to someone else with a different identity. And it was so blatantly inappropriate that I kind of just laughed it off at the time, and didn't think too much of it. But even looking back now, I'm like, wow, I can't believe that happened.
Yeah, I mean, several times. I think right now, I think I feel out of place in the USA, and also when I go to Mexico, I feel like I've lost like some sense of identity. But I remember at the beginning in the US, it was so obvious that I wasn't part of the culture, and I just stuck out, and like, especially in Texas, which is where I started, it was even more marked. When Trump won the elections, right? Mm-hmm. I remember that was one time that, like, I had been living in the U.S. for a while. Then I think maybe 10 years. I can't really remember, but I remember I thought I knew my people. I knew where everything was, and then this happened, and it made me question everything. And I remember I was among my friends, and some of the people I thought were my friends were like laughing and saying, "Oh, I guess you're going to have to go back to your country," and it made me question everything that I knew, And then I remember I was living in Somerville at the time, and I was having these like thoughts of like not knowing what was going on. And I remember I looked up at like the city hall, and they had this big banner that said, "No matter where you're from, you're welcome here." And I remember that really like made me feel like, yeah, this is why I feel like I belong here, because like it's not just me. Like there's this like I guess like people that care,
Yeah, of course. I felt out of place here and in the DR because when you grow up in both places, you pick up, both cultures in your own way. When I moved to the DR, when I was in middle school, when we moved there, I was at least an American in their eyes. I was saying dude and wicked and this and that, and the kids picked up on that. And I picked up Dominican culture, obviously, spending a few years there. And when I got back to the US, like I said before, I had missed quite a bit. There was a lot of music and pop culture, memes that other kids knew about, and things that kids knew about that I didn't. So there was that. There was also the fact that even though I have an American accent, I think when I speak, and there's plenty of people from all over the world in Lynn, in Massachusetts, like generally, it's not so diverse. So it's pretty common, even now, to find out, that someone didn't think I was American or something like that. Like once upon a time, I think this was 5 years ago, I think I went to like a gym or something, or some sports facility for some reason, and I found out from my girlfriend that some of the people who were coworkers who worked there didn't think I would speak English the way I do. They thought like, oh, this kid, they just expected me to speak, with an accent, which is fine. It's not a big deal, but it just reminded me that, oh yeah, people do see me differently here, even though I consider myself American fully. Comments, that people make. Your English is so good, stuff like that. Other people have gotten that who aren't even from a different country. They were born and raised their entire lives, never even left the United States. No, I've gotten that a bunch of times. Yeah.
Yes and no, but I think my personality helps. I don't have any, I'm not an introvert. So I mingle and I relate to people and I go everywhere. And I don't have this feeling, or I do not accept ghettos. I don't believe that we should accept, the groups that are divided. And here, it took me a while to understand the system. It is all about the groups. It's all about in the suburbs. If your kids don't go to the public schools, you are not inserted in the community. If you don't go to the church, if you don't go to temple, if you don't do the PTO cupcake, if you don't go to the library, storytelling time, or you just don't belong because nobody knows you and you don't know anyone. And if your kids don't play in the baseball league, the town soccer, or you don't bring oranges to you don't have a cooler that you have to bring oranges, so you do not belong. But I never felt that I didn't belong. It was a choice. I belonged to other places, but I don't see that this society system happening in Brazil, for example, or South America, or actually anywhere. I just feel it here. And I do see the tendency, a lot of people ask, do you know Brazilian people? I don't, because I didn't want to be, and I never came across Brazilian people. I do know groups of Brazilian people who only hang out with Brazilian people. I do know Brazilian people who go to school in their kids go to school in Framingham. They still don't speak English. So there is a lot of pockets. But I observe that, but I don't feel that I belong here or I belong there. I go everywhere.
Yes, all the time. For a long time, I was a person without a country, going back to that coup in '82 in Kenya. I was born in Kenya, and in '82, when that coup occurred, and shortly thereafter, they decided that the law that made you a citizen until you were 18 was not going to be in effect any longer. So they changed it from if you were born in the country to if your parents were born in the country. And my parents were not born in the country. So all of a sudden, I went from having a place that I was a citizen of to having no citizenship or legal residence, for that matter, anywhere in the world. So I lived there, but even though I lived there, if I left the country, I had to get a visa to go back. So basically not belong there, from at least the powers that be mind, right? Like, that is where you were born, and it'll always remain where you were born. You can't change that. So that was really hard. And so here I was not considered from here because I wasn't. I was born somewhere else and I am different than people here. In Kenya, I was not considered from there because of the color of my skin and the fact that I wasn't born there. I mean, that my parents weren't born there. In Goa, I was, oh, your parents left and they went there, so you're a foreigner. You didn't ever full-time live here, even though you came and lived here for parts of it. So I was just an outsider everywhere. There was no place in the world that I felt truly at home.
Yes, absolutely. Especially when I arrived, I felt out of place because although I did speak English when I arrived, but my English, I had a much thicker accent and I spoke very slowly because I was translating in my brain. I speak Portuguese as my first language. So, and you know, people made fun of that. They expect me to understand not just the language, but the culture here in America. And the problem is that I'm coming from a very different cultural background. And a lot of the times, when, especially in the beginning, I had to stop people and just be like, no, what you're saying is horrible and you are offending me. And this is not okay. And the fact that I look like you doesn't mean that we agree or that your worldview is my worldview. And that was a really weird moment of like, you know, things being lost in translation to, yeah, it's just very, very strange. Also, my sense of humor was extremely raunchy and I swore like a sailor, like everybody does in Brazil. And that was a difficult adaptation because I literally did not see it as an issue and people were so uncomfortable and I was very confused in the beginning. I was like, what is happening right now? Why are people so uncomfortable? And maybe it's because I was saying really raunchy, offensive things without knowing it, because that's just the sense of humor in Brazil is much more abrasive potentially. I don't know, but that was an interesting moment of being like, ooh, I have to change the way I speak and I have to change the way that I interact with people and the way that I joke about things because people here, you know, there's the puritanical thing and people are much more concerned about language and swearing and whatnot. So that was a moment that I was very, very confused and very out of place and very trying to figure out how to change myself, which is a really hard thing to do.
I do feel comfortable with my family wherever they are. There are certain parts of Orange County that I really feel comfortable with. Other places I still don't feel really comfortable going. But it's really about like the community in the space. It's not necessarily like the physical space itself. Yeah, I'm like well aware like physical spaces are created maybe not with the intention of like allowing everyone in, but I think like even at like a community festival, that's where sometimes I feel at home. It's really nice. Yeah, I don't know, certain spaces, but yeah, if there's like people I know or if there's family members or if I'm getting just a good vibe from people, then I will feel comfortable, but yeah.
With my family, with my husband, I really feel safer when there's more diversity in the room, and not necessarily just in terms of race. You know, I love hearing about people's backgrounds and people's identities. I love hearing people's life stories, right? And I love finding those stories that make us find and embrace our shared humanity.
I do feel very comfortable when I'm in my place, in my home. I think more nowadays than when I go back to Brazil, although there are some places in Brazil that are very dear to me, and whenever I'm there, I feel home.
I think you know, being around people that love you always enables you to like express yourself and feel like show your true self. Ultimately, I think that the most welcome and comfortable I feel is when I'm with my partner, with my wife. That's where I feel like I can be completely me, and you know, she knows me very well. You know.
Well, there is the Dominican Republic itself, where even though especially when I was younger, I felt like an outsider when I was living there for a little bit. Now, going back, I feel much more comfortable. I recently discovered Puerto Rico, rediscovered, I guess is the right word. And in the United States, Lynn. I grew up in Lynn. It's a very, very interesting place, a very diverse place, where people don't look at someone who's clearly not white and just assume, oh, they're a foreigner, you know. Oh, they got here like 10 weeks ago or something, or whatever. They crossed the border, they're part of the caravan, whatever it is that they think. Maybe in other places, people don't usually think that in Lynn, you know. People rightfully, or at least a lot of people, just, you know, see you as you. At least that's how I feel. Salem, I will say as well, I'll give some props to Salem. Salem is not as diverse as Lynn, but it is also a very welcoming place as well.
Zumba is the what the UN should be, right? It's we have people from all over the place, and they all meet in a happy environment where there's a lot of good health, a lot of dynamic things happening: music, dance, exercise, exchange of knowledge and exchange of culture. So it is great, and it happens everywhere in the world. Wherever you do Zumba, it means that you connect with people from all over the world. And it's not a competitive environment, so it is it's like I belong here.
You know, that's another good question. The most welcome I have felt in North America is within the queer community. I have never felt so comfortable and like people were not willing to accept, but just accepting, truly accepting, without really having any second thoughts or just any thoughts at all, really, just being really welcoming to anybody. And I love that so much, and I think that's something that I would like to see more of. It's also a community that talks a lot about things when they need to be addressed and when there's discomfort, and I do appreciate that. You know, I think that being open to dialogue, and even if the conversations are difficult, like if we don't have difficult conversations, then we never get anywhere. And I feel like there's sometimes places can be stifling in North America because it's hard to even initiate a conversation because people are so concerned about offending, about being offended, about saying the wrong thing. And sometimes in a conversation you will have to say things that are wrong or that are not well spoken and that you will have to think about, and people might help you with that. But then again, if you don't have the conversation, you're never going to learn. So I do like the queer community in that sense a lot because it's a place where I've been able to have more conversations that are complicated and challenging, I think. And the art world too, I guess. Queer art adjacent, it's always kind of connected in some way, but and the art world is kind of bittersweet in that sense. I think there's a lot that's really very gate-kept and very difficult to access, and then there's another part of the art world that is extremely accessible, and people are trying really hard to welcome people in and welcome conversation. So in that sense, I like to make that distinction because if I say just the art world, I think that it's not all of it that is welcoming. So, but, you know, people that are doing public art and people that are just, you know, working with community and working with collaborative projects and collaborative practices, I think that that's really also a good place where I have had really good interactions and felt really, you know, a sense of belonging. Yeah.
It's hard to say. I don't know. Sometimes they mention like them missing home. I think they still consider Vietnam their home. I do have some family members that don't consider that home just because of like historical, political context, you know. A lot of Vietnamese people are encouraged to think of like America as their home and like have like kind of a negative light on Vietnam. But yeah, I think for like their kids and like the younger people, I think it really is something that they would agree has been like a really good decision.
The expectation was that I should fulfill my my education. So in that sense, yes. I think that the initial expectations, yes. I think for my father and mother was that I learn English, so that expectations is met pretty much because I'm speaking it. The other goal was to actually finish the school. So I finished graduate school, I finished partially some of the college I spent here and part of high school as well. So those goals are met. But I think everything after graduate school was my own expectations. So whatever goals I set out, I wanted to get a job, I want to get, you know, whatever years of experience, buy a house, have a family. Those were not necessarily set out by my family, but more of my own. So in that sense, yes, I would say I more or less achieved my expectations, I guess.
I think so. My brothers and I have had a better education because we moved here, and that was very important to my parents. That was a big reason for us moving here. And I've certainly had opportunities that I would have never had if I had stayed in Mexico. So I think that has certainly been an overwhelmingly positive thing.
I don't think I had any expectations. Since it wasn't a planned move, I didn't really had any expectations in my mind. It just happened. So I'm very happy with what we got, how much we got being here, but there were no expectations to be fulfilled.
Yeah, I think so. I think ultimately for my father, his expectation was that I was going to develop a career and that I was going to be safe. And as I grew into the idea, I thought the same. And I think I feel like now I've been able to have a successful career. I've been able to like recover my stride and get back to where I was before, in career-wise, before I moved. And I don't feel insecure, you know. It's not something I have to lose sleep at night, so.
I don't think we didn't have any expectations that one of us would move. I mean, our expectation is to be happy and accomplish and do something that it's going to provide you with money to pay your bills, entertainment, culture, education, and be healthy. That was the expectation. We were not a family who aimed for a better life outside São Paulo, where we were born. It was a consequence of, I got a job. I didn't have the American dream. It could be anywhere in the world. It just happened to be here. We didn't have this goal, or we were not set. You know, my nephew went to medical school. He got into medical school here. He couldn't do it. He went back to Brazil and he started all over again. He did the whole process all over again. He wanted to go to medical school, doesn't matter where.
Yes and no. So we came to the US with the dream of things being easier, with the hope of a better life. I wouldn't say necessarily that it is better or easier, neither of those things. In the States, you are constantly working and fighting and fighting for that better life. You have the opportunity to get it, but I'm not necessarily sure that this is the only place you can get it. And if you hadn't applied those same efforts elsewhere in the world, that you would not necessarily have that home, have that life. We're getting better, and I think learning the downside of all of the lifestyle of the US here now. Climate change being huge, GMOs, preservatives in all of our food are not healthy things. They're not good things. They may look beautiful. They are that shiny apple, right? There are pockets of this wonder, this dream that we hope for, but it's not universal. And it's no different than any other place, really. I think you can create that if you all want it and make it happen. It's not the place that makes it happen, it's the people that you're with that makes it happen.
The type of life that I wanted to live, that I can take time to like be with friends, be with my community, make time to like, catch a movie and take my dog for a walk and go for a hike on top of the daily grind. So in that sense, I think, yes, I think it's a healthier lifestyle than a megalopolis. And I think in that sense, yes, I think my expectation was met in moving to Boston in particular, to Greater Boston. Yeah.
Yes. So I am working with my family to produce a recipe book. Yes. And again, food is very important to me because I think growing up, there are a lot of things that my parents didn't tell me, maybe to like protect me or not to like have me go like emotionally off the rails, because it is like, there's a lot of hard parts to, their journey here. But I think with food, it's definitely a love language. And I want to keep that with me, and I want to be able to share that with other people and encourage people to do that with their families as well, because it's super important, right? It's a way of just passing down generations of stories, I guess. Yeah, I still think there's a large misunderstanding around multiculturalism and immigration. Yeah, I think everyone really has something to contribute, even if their family has been here in the States for a long time. Like identity is very complex and it's very nuanced, and sometimes I think politics and the media like to portray things as pretty black and white. So yeah, I would say always challenge what you've been told and challenge your own assumptions, because you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Well, I think that my major goal at the moment is raising my small children, and wearing several hats is a little bit difficult for any parent, and or professional for that matter. So I'm trying to see if I can be a parent who's present, which is very important in my culture. We are not families who leave children from 8 till 6 p.m. and not see and not be there with them. Have a career not in the traditional sense, not necessarily 9 to 5, but trying to find a way to be able to work in the sustainability and climate space where I can have an impact as an individual versus being part of a cog in the wheel in a corporation, which I've tried before, but it's not my thing. But I think that my immediate, obvious, and tangible goal is to be there for my children, be for my family as much as possible, so I raise a next generation of happy and healthy children, and who are very aware about sustainability and climate issues, and bring in something positive to this country that we call our home, America.
I do a lot of watercolors, and so I've been thinking about doing a children's book, because this comes up for me a lot about, you know, finding your place in society, right? And finding your place where you belong, and especially for immigrants and for people who are looking for a place to belong.
My works mostly deal with climate change and climate education.
Right now I'm an aerospace engineer. I work on designing jet engines. Yeah, I mean, I think after some point, I guess I started like romanticizing this like American dream experience of like, you know, starting from zero, leaving everything behind, and then building something here. And I think that part of me now, I became a citizen. I have a wife now, and I got a house now. So I think I'm hoping eventually to be able to build a family and you know, have that like you know, like second generation and like, you know, like this I don't know, heritage and make, you know, contribute to the country. You know.
The biggest thing in my life right now is that I'm expecting a baby. My wife is pregnant, so there's that. That's what's on my mind the most. And in the grand scheme of things, I'd like for her to have my experiences, which are, you know, being able to live in different countries and, or at least grow up understanding fully different cultures. I'd like for her to have that. For some context, I'm an employee of the City of Salem. I work in the Mayor's Office as Constituent Services Director and Latino Affairs, or Asuntos Latinos, as I tell the people, the actual Spanish speakers who come by the office. And when Spanish speakers do come by the office, which is very, very common, I guess my work is to help people with whatever situation they have in their life, ideally as it relates to a problem I can actually help them with. Separate from my actual job, I'm currently the president, but generally a member of the nonprofit in Salem, the Latino Leadership Coalition, which started, I believe, in 2012. And that group has undertaken a number of different projects over the years and a number of different causes. But currently, in 2024, the LLC has an oral histories project it has undertaken, not too dissimilar to this, where we want to record people's stories, their immigration stories, Salem residents specifically, their stories of moving into this city, and what that was like, how things have changed. You know, we think it's just important to grab the stories of people who've lived here for a long time and have seen many different things, to physically capture those stories before, you know, these people are no longer with us, and the stories either disappear or they pass on, somewhat altered, as stories often change when they're just transmitted orally. So that's our project, Oral Histories. Hoping to accomplish that this summer, but we'll see.
New England Art Center is a membership organization. It's going to be offering professional development for artists and art leaders. There are different tiers of members. One of them is the artist member, so you can exhibit at the gallery. In addition to exhibit, you're paying for my service. So if you need portfolio review, critique sessions, help to build your website, help to price your work, help to write a grant, career advice, this is what I'm going to offer to our members. So it's not only a co-op or a membership gallery model that you pay and you have your solo show. There are no solo shows. It's all about group shows. I will pack that place with work, so when you go there, you are going to have a full range of a variety of techniques and mediums and artists, different generations, different geographic locations. I have artists from Miami, I have artists from Santa Fe, even from Brazil. The exhibition space, it's at the SOA Art and Culture District, where the heart of the art and design district is in Boston, which is amazing. I love everything about that area. It was revitalized. There's a lot of creators, so that's a perfect spot. I would not have this business in any other area in New England other than there.
I learned to swim in my first year of high school, and everybody would laugh at me and bully me because I didn't know how to swim. And my swim teacher noticed that, and she said the only way to silence them is to challenge them and beat them. So she gave up all her lunch hours and taught me how to swim, taught me life-saving, taught me first aid and personal survival. And right away, that changed my life. Being able to swim in that gala and not be laughed at anymore changed my life. Knowing that I could do things about it if I didn't like something and find somebody who would advocate for me and help me changed my life in many ways because it taught me how to stand up for myself. And it saved so many lives, but I am so passionate about water safety, and I would love to pay that forward, which is, I think, why I teach at the Y and have taught at the Y as much as I have. I'll never get rich making teaching swim classes at the Y. That is not why I'm there. But I love my members, and oftentimes the parents will come in and they don't know how to swim, and they're bringing their kids because they know it's important, but they don't have access, and they can only afford to teach their kid to swim. And I said, well, if your kid goes out there and has a cramp, are you going to watch them die? It's a very basic question. And the answer is, of course you don't want to do that, right? So you have to learn how to swim. And so I oftentimes will teach both the parents and the children at the same time because I would like to bring swim access to everyone. The number of drownings we have is unconscionable and unnecessary. We are around a lot of water. All children need access to swim classes. All parents need access to swim classes. And that access to swim classes and knowledge of water safety will save lives. So if I had a magic wand and if I had a lot of money, I would bring access to swim lessons. The other thing I would bring access to is art and music, because those things connect us across all boundaries. It doesn't matter where you're from. If you went to Fusion Fest, or if you have been at Jazz and Soul Fest, or if you just ever have been in a place where they're dancing in the streets, it doesn't matter what country you are from. It doesn't matter what language the person is singing or whether you understand the words. It might make it better, but really and truly, the music transcends all cultures, all boundaries. Music and food and art do that. It connects us all as human beings and brings us together. And I feel like if we had that, world peace can be attainable, because if we see each other as human beings who make beautiful things, then we can actually treat people the way that we're treating people.
I'm a visual artist and a public artist right now. I'm the Salem Public Artist in Residence. I'm also a resident at the Boston Center for the Arts right now, and I'm also the SMFA Traveling Fellow. So those are the 3 things right now in my plate.